you. Hello.
Sorry, I can't see against the lights.
Hi, my name is Paul Butler from Enterprise Ireland. My question is for James Cox. It's in relation to his commentary in relation to storage. Could you elaborate a little bit on the unique Irish position on that?
Yeah. Shall I shout or come up?
You can come up. Come up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Irish, start with broadly speaking on storage generally. The two factors that drive profitable storage investment, so there's sort of energy bulk storage, are the capital cost of building the thing in the first place, and then the round trip efficiency and the losses you incur. And you're making money on the spreads in the market. There's all sorts of reasons you can build storage, but bulk energy storage, you're looking at arbitrage currently of overnight prices and daytime prices. That's what you're looking at. That arbitrage, those spreads in the market, are very, very sensitive to huge numbers of things that are going on. So when you add the capital costs of building, the losses, and the spreads you need, it becomes a very, very risky investment on just a wholesale market basis. The spreads might exist for 3-4 months, and then they collapse because people change their actions, they change their bidding behaviours in the market. So that's, if you like, broadly speaking, on energy storage, and that would apply in a German context or a GB context or French context or an American context, where you've got big, flexible systems with very, very large amounts of generation interconnection. The Irish market is very, very different because you've got obviously a very small market, but it's heavily isolated, currently pretty isolated, and potentially continue to be so for quite a long time. And therefore the potential for energy storage is much more interesting, because the reasons for doing energy storage, there are a lot more in the Irish market than, if you like, elsewhere. So you have all the system balancing issues, the shorter term, the reserve and response issues, and a lot of elements around soaking up the intermittency of the wind. So in particular, as you put more and more wind on the system, being able to absorb the lost load, the excess wind generation in Irish context. So Ireland, in that regard, is sort of a pretty unique example in Europe. If you look at other examples like Denmark, same size market, similar amounts of wind generation, heavily interconnected to other markets, whereas Ireland, the Irish market, stands different. So I think opportunity storage in the Irish market look good, but broadly speaking, as a global investment, electricity storage as it stands at the moment is on fairly poor ground, limited opportunities.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I just ask, cheating, I know, but
yes.
James, a follow-up. Would you like, in that context, would you comment on storage in Scotland and the current projects that are going on there?
I guess the context in terms of the comments on Scotland is a lot of the justification or the reasons for doing storage in Scotland would be driven by the very large amounts of wind generation you can install in Scotland, and then getting that power to somewhere useful, which is fundamentally the south of England, Birmingham, and so on. So that, if you like, the value of storage in the GB context doesn't look like it would be economically viable. But if you can offset transmission investment and avoid expensive offshore reinforcement by building storage, then you've suddenly got a new opportunity, a new reason for building storage. So in that particular context, again, when you're isolated markets, it can be, in some contexts, cheaper to build storage or more efficient to build a combination of storage and interconnection than just building interconnection alone. And it's really that interrelationship between those two factors that often drive the economic case for storage. It's not bulk energy storage, but where you can avoid additional infrastructure investment and very expensive infrastructure investment, storage looks like, or can often look like, an economically justified solution then.
Liam Mulligan from Siemens, and maybe it's a question for James again, but also possibly for Dermot and Eddie. Given TenneT's current complaints about the imbalance between obligations and economic return of the connection of offshore in the North German network at the moment, and their lack of interconnection in reality to the South German market, what incentives are needed, what balance is needed of investment in order to make really the supergrid and the northwest wind resource properly available to the UK and the continental markets?
I'd like to make a comment on that if I could, and also on the previous thing. See, what our President is just after saying is that we can't consider, and this is particularly relevant for Poiri, I mean, we can't consider a future that is today and say that that's going to be around in 2030. By 2030, that's 5 generations of cars away. And if oil keeps on going the way it's going, it's at 120 a barrel now. You know, how can we justify not having 100% electric cars in Europe by 2030? That's 5 generations away. So when you talk about storage, you don't have to talk about building either compressed air storage or very large pump storage schemes. You have to just look at, you know, what happens when you've got 400 million cars with 25 kilowatt hours in battery. So that's all I want to say on that. On the question of TenneT, TenneT were asked to build a grid out into the North Sea at a rate of return of 6%. And they said, well, the risks are much higher than that. The risks are, in fact, would justify an investment maybe of 10%. And I fully support TenneT in this. And I explained my support to the German regulator recently and said, if you want to do this, you have to recognise that risk and return are two sides of the same coin. And we can't build, and nobody can build a supergrid if you're going to simply say you have to build it for the same price of building grids on land, because you know you've got big technical issues. We don't have a DC breaker. We don't have DC at 1 million volts yet. We haven't built undersea methods of safeguarding your cables when they're built. We don't have any of those technologies. There's a huge bunch of technological, weather and corrosion risks. So therefore, why should you do it for the same price? So TenneT are right, and the German government has got to accommodate to that.
We'll take 2 more questions. I'm sorry, just here at the front row.
Oh, sorry, it was really just I was asked for a comment on that, and maybe just 2 comments. Just as an operator, and I always, when people ask about storage, I always say we love storage because it helps in operating an intermittent system. And you know, Turloughill, as you know, we have it on the island. It has been going through a major refurbishment for the past year, and that has caused us problems on the system, and it has caused increased costs in the system. So, so it isn't just what James talked about, the difference between prices. It's also the system support services that are provided by storage that are very important. But the other point I want to make, just in relation to, and I did ask a number of questions at the start of my presentation. One of them was, who pays for it? I didn't answer it, but just to make a point that I think the EU is very important here. And I probably should have said this in my own presentation on the East-West Interconnector, that the EU have put up, you know, 110 million, which is roughly 20% of the cost of that. But I think the fact that the EU are driving the policy space in this through the EU roadmap. If you look at Kriegers Flak, where 2 countries are coming together to develop a wind farm, there is an incremental cost in creating a kind of the germs of a grid there, and the EU are supporting that incremental cost. So I think that is a very, very important kind of dimension in getting this thing off the ground. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add, Chairman, to what Chairman is saying there, something that I overlooked mentioning in the context of what Dermot is saying is that there is serious European funding coming available under the Connecting Europe initiative. Now, it's not just for energy; it's also for transport and communications. But when I say serious European funding, it's I think it's 9 billion. And this is for developing infrastructure to connect Europe, or to interconnect Europe, if you like, and to have a seamless energy market, and obviously, you know, more seamless markets in terms of transport and telecommunications. I think there's a serious prospect of, you know, whatever developments, you know, hopefully proceed within the context of the overall national and European framework, to get serious assistance in Northwest Europe for a decarbonisation of the energy system through the export of offshore renewables. And, you know, and we're not talking about millions. I mean, you know, that particular fund, you know, funded the Isles project so far. That's only $1 million. I'm talking of the order, maybe 500, 600 million, maybe $1 billion for individual projects, provided that they meet the criteria. And I know it's under discussion at Irish government level because the Irish government have been asked for proposals in this regard to Europe. And we're very much pushing an open door. But we've got to seize this opportunity now, have the joined up thinking with you know, our Northern Ireland partners and the south of Ireland, Scotland, and into the UK. And what Eddie said is about the UK, about England and Wales in particular, seriously needing this energy by 2020-25 is absolutely crucial. And this is our opportunity, but we need to start the planning and get it underway now. And very much a lot of the stuff that Dermot was talking about earlier, studies that EirGrid are conducting on a European basis, are very much feeding into that as well.